unless you expose it before the Lord, you can have no part of him. It's about humility. It's about transparency. It's about vulnerability. And Jesus says, come and see. Come with me. I want to have a deeper relationship with you. And finally, to make my third point, so I will be graded by my rubrics, by my instructor, Agrippa. The beginning of his ministry, calling us, come and see. The middle of his ministry of a closer presence and intimacy with him. And then the end of his ministry in the Garden of Gethsemane. If you go to Matthew, the book of Matthew, chapter 26, is the account in verse 36 where Jesus goes to the Garden of Gethsemane. And if we just need to think about this for a moment, the word Gethsemane, as most of us know, means the olive press. It symbolizes that of being crushed, right? And Jesus was crushed for our iniquities. He was going to the place of prayer knowing what was going to happen the very next day, that he was going to be arrested and that he was going to be crucified. So this is the end of his earthly ministry. And so he invites his disciples to come with him into the garden. He invites them, and if you take a look, we're just going to look at it really quickly. But verse 36 says, Jesus says, sit there while I go over there and pray. And so he took Peter and two of his sons along with him, and they began to be sorrowful and troublesome. And then he said to them, my soul, this is Jesus, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Now stay here and keep watch with me. And then they went a little further, and going a little further, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed, my Father, if it's possible, may this cup be taken from me, yet not as I will, but as you will. Then he returned to the disciples, and he found them what? Sleeping. Jesus is praying with deep sorrow. He's praying with this intensity, as part of the scripture says that he prayed so hard that it was like sweats of blood upon him, that he was taking the weight. He knew what was going to happen. He knew that he was going to be crucified. He knew that he was going to freely give him over to the hands of the Romans to face torture, to face the pain, to face the suffering, to face all the sin that was going to be applied upon him. And he was overwhelmed to the point of saying, look, if there be any other way, God, then take this cup from me, but not my will, but your will be done. And so he is in agony, and his closest friends are asleep. Man, I wonder how many times in my life I've been asleep when Jesus is calling me into a closer walk with him and a closer relationship with him. And then he goes again a second time and he prays, my Father, if this is possible, take this cup from me. And then when he came back again, he found them sleeping because their eyes were heavy. So he left them and he went once more praying a third time, saying the same thing. Then he returned to the disciples and said, are you still sleeping and resting? Look, the hour has come and the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go here. And here comes my betrayer. And what I just really want to kind of just draw this out, if you just want to think about it for a moment. Jesus went into this time of prayer not as a place of escape, but a place of obedience. We don't pray in order to escape the things that God has for us, but rather we pray so that we might go into a place of obedience. The Gethsemane, to me, is the sign of obedience, not my will, but your will be done. And here's the invitation. Jesus invites us to participate, not observe. It's not about observation, watch and me pray. It's an invitation to participate with him in his life and in his ministry, and to participate with him in those prayers in Gethsemane. And so my encouragement to you today is that Jesus, throughout his ministry, is always saying, come and see. Come with me further into the garden. Come with me deeper into an intimate relationship with me. It's all about the abiding presence of the Lord in our life. It's always about being in his presence. And so let me just encourage you as you think about mentor. I was trying to think of a spiritual application, and I'm stretching it here. Being mentored or being taught, it's not about just information. It's about participation. It's about participating in what God has for you to further the kingdom in your appointment. So I just want to encourage you and bless you this morning with those words. And so let's just have a word of prayer, shall we? Our gracious Heavenly Father, I thank you and praise you for your goodness. I thank you, Lord God, that you do indeed call us into a deeper relationship, to come and see, to expose ourselves before you, to be washed clean by you, and to participate with you through your suffering, your death, and your resurrection. And so, Lord, I give you thanks this morning. I thank you for those that have come to give of their time to lead the cadets, and the beauty and the awesome privilege it is to work with community leaders and engage with advisory boards to further the kingdom. So, Lord, I thank you and praise you. In Jesus' name, amen. And God bless you. I hope I got those 3 points okay. All right. Yeah, it's just for you. But I just want to take a moment to introduce to you Dan Keim. He is on our advisory board, and he is going to be emceeing today and kind of leading us through all the various avenues and all the great things that you have in your program. There's some bios about our board members. So will you please give it up for Dan? Dan, thank you so much for coming and giving of your time.
Thank you very much, Colonel Wild. Much appreciated, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here and spend time with all you folks today. So we've done this once before, about 2 years ago, and I think it was well received, and we had some great content. We've had some great speakers, and I think as you look through the bios, I'm sorry. Okay, is that a little better? Gotcha. Okay, much better? Okay, thank you guys again for attending today. It's our absolute pleasure to be able to spend some time with you. We've done this about 2 years ago. We did this, and it was well received. I think the content was great. My main job is to make sure Dick stays on time, because he has so much a wealth of knowledge that he could fill the whole day up. But we've got a bunch of great speakers today. I'll quickly go through the agenda. We did make a couple of small changes. Based on availability, Gaddy Vasquez was unable to attend today, so that changed up our schedule a little bit. But Dick's going to start us off with a history of the Army, advisory organizations and the relationships that we have. Caltha will talk about creating an advisory board and recruiting the right board members. I think that's always great content. We'll have a refreshment break at 10:30 out in the breezeway. And then just before lunch, we'll have the attributes of a great advisory board that Dick, again, will come back and speak on. And this afternoon, we've got some fantastic content. Katie's going to talk about marketing, promotion, and brand awareness. I think you'll really enjoy some of the insights that she's going to provide there. We're going to have a Wake Up Your Board, Cultivating Energy, Curiosity, and Candor. Chad's going to lead us in that conversation. And then to kind of round out the day, we've got some great things, the board members' perspective panel. So that's gain some insight on what board members think and see about how they like to support the Army. And then Major Terry will close us out with closing remarks and a prayer. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Dick, and I'll keep the clock on.
Well, good morning. This is not the first time I've stood at this podium, and it's always it's not a pleasure, it's an honor and a pleasure. And I'm just going to correct the Colonel on one word. I hate to correct people of high rank, but Colonel, it's not so much participation as it's relationships. And we're going to talk about relationships today as well as folding that into participation. Always enjoy being with the Wild family. His little brother, Roy, was my officer back many years back in Modesto, and we had a great time, and we decided to take a mission trip, and Roy, his brother, and Colonel Dickinson, who is now your DC here, and my wife and I and a couple others, we went to Prague in the Czech Republic, we went to IHQ, we went to Switzerland. We had a fabulous time going and seeing the Army at its roots and seeing all about what it's really about in this Army. So I have a great attachment to to the Wild family. We call his brother Roy. If you haven't met him, we called him Junior. And yeah. So with that, I'm going to segue directly into a very brief discussion about the history of the Army, and I hope you have all gotten a copy of this piece that I made. So that maybe just a word or two to introduce myself. My mom and dad met at the Evangeline Hotel in 1935. So you see, my Army roots are pretty deep. And they got married 2 years later, and a few years after that I came along. And we've been Army ever since. I've served 55 years on the Modesto board. I'm currently serving on 7 different Army boards and councils. I'm the longest term serving member on the national board, 42 years. And you scratch me, I bleed Army blue. And it's all family. I feel like family here today, and it's a joy to be with you all and to talk about the passion that I have. Also, you may know I've written 3 books on the Army. Some of you have copies of these books. My co-author, I dragged him along a few years ago, is Commissioner Joe Nolan. Commissioner Joe Nolan was the commissioner in the East when 9/11 hit. He was in Hawaii as divisional commander when Hurricane Iniki wiped out the whole island of Kauai. Joe has seen it all. And so Joe and I are just having a great time writing and doing these books. And guess what? We quit after 3. This was the trilogy. We're now starting on a 4th one about relationships. And it's gonna be more of a fun read. We're going to talk about relationships from a story and a narrative standpoint. Well, we can stand here and breeze all day, but we got a lot of material to cover, and we'll have time in the panel this afternoon and at random times for questions. So if you have questions, hold those questions now and corner me anytime you see me around the next 2 days, and also on the panel this afternoon. You have in front of you, I hope, a 3-page history of the Army. Anybody didn't get it? Joseph, did you do your job? He did his job. I'm mentoring this guy in the back row, and I have to keep a pretty close eye on him, but we won't go there today. I'm just going to highlight what you have because there's no sense getting into detail, but it's really exciting to read the history of the Army. We all know that it started in 1985 by General Booth. We all know the story of him coming back from riding the train and seeing the people under the tracks and all. But the thing that this focuses on is how did boards get going into this thing? And only 1 month after the general launched this effort, he went out to the community and got a hold of somebody and said, we need some help, and we need you to help us. So 2 years later, in 1867, he organized the first council. And we go forward to there. They came to the United States briefly in 1873 to Cleveland. And immediately they had a group there of advisors who could help them. We go forward from there to the present time. They officially came to the U.S. in 1870, and the Army's, in 1880. The Army's been here ever since. I like what it says down in the next to the last paragraph about recruiting an army of volunteers who embraced the practical religion that would one day be dubbed Christianity with its sleeves rolled up. You see on page 2, he talks about, it was many years later that he finally dubbed it the Salvation Army. The irony to me is, if you read in that first chapter on page 2, he recruited a British naval admiral to be his advisor, and we could just as easily have called it the Salvation Navy. And for a guy who's a Navy veteran from several years at sea in the Navy, I would be a whole lot happier to be serving in the Salvation Navy than the Salvation Army. We didn't like those Army guys that much, but 50 years later, I've gotten to kind of used to it, so it's okay either way. Fast forward, they did this with great advisors and great support. Catherine came along. They came to the United States then in 1920, and immediately Catherine Booth became not only the national commander, but she also founded an advisory board system. So you see, we go back 106 years. We go back 106 years as board people who were coming alongside of the Army. And now we've spread throughout the world. And you'll see on the back page, 1925, Colonel Richard Holtz was happy to declare there was an army of not less than 20,000 business and professionals who were signed up for the Army. Think of that. 105 years ago, we already had 20,000 people. And then just one more step here. We formed the National Advisory Council in 1982, and then in 1982, it became the National Advisory Board. And just 2 years later, I don't know how, I don't feel that old, but just 2 years after, in 1984, I joined the National Advisory Board. A brief personal story there. I asked the Colonel Ferez, who was who was administering the National Board at the time. I said, Colonel, I'm looking around and I'm seeing really important people. I'm seeing heads of international organizations. I'm seeing heads of huge Fortune 500 companies. I'm seeing ambassadors. I'm seeing politicians, and me. And the Colonel put his hand on my shoulder. He says, Dick, we needed balance. So there you have it. I guess I am the balance that came along as a part of that. But anyway, it's been a great ride, and I enjoy coming along with you guys. And by the way, the 3 books that Commissioner and I have written, Joseph will have some copies if you're interested. Actually, they're $20. If they're unsigned, they're free if I sign them. So see Joseph, and he will take care of that part of it for you. Also, hang on to your outlines, because in the next segment, we had a little glitch. It says in your program, Ambassador Getty Vasquez is going to be speaking, and that's not the case. Getty apparently is ill, and so they've asked me to step in, and I'm going to take on the task of walking you through one of my favorite pieces, which is on the back page of your history. So put that away for now. Don't read it. We'll get to it very soon. I want to talk to you right now about relationships. I'm also going to take off my watch. There's a famous story about a visitor who came to a church, and the pastor got up and he was fidgeting, and he finally opened the Bible, and the visitor said, "What's that about?" He said, "Well, we read the Bible to the Lord." He said, "That's good." The pastor then prayed. The guy says, "What's he doing?" He says, "He's speaking to God." He said, "That's wonderful." And he says, then he took off his watch. "What does that mean?" And the old deacon says, "Absolutely nothing." So that's, I promise to be off on time. Let's talk about relationships. I got an email 2 days ago from David Avalis. I think most of you know him. David was a classmate of yours. He graduated last year. He's now the officer in Oxnard. He may be watching this on stream and online. If he is, good morning, David. But he sent me this email 2 days ago. "Good morning, Mr. Dick." That's me. "Morning, Mr. Dick. I was thinking yesterday about when I first met you. I was intimidated at first. I had learned much about experience, how much experience you have in the Salvation Army. I instantly told myself, I don't know much, but I'm willing to learn. I think that a willingness to learn, experience, fail forward, and be honest served as a formative precursor in building a relationship with you. Never did you make me feel little about what I didn't know, about certain concepts, but you encouraged me in the learning. I'm always grateful for you, your friendship, and the mentorship relationship." And that's what it's all about. He sent me a text this morning. When I got up, there was a text in my box waiting. He said, "I'm praying for you. I'm praying for you, and I'm pulling for you, and I know it's going to be a good day." This is the guy I'm mentoring, and he's out there encouraging me. That's what it's all about. Andy Miller was a great national commander of the Salvation Army. Andy had a great saying. He would define to people how the Army was constructed. He said, if you take our hand to God, and you take our hand to man, you take our spiritual dimension, you take our community dimension, you put them together. If you do it just right, no one can see where one starts and the other leaves off. And I feel the same way about our relationships between the officers and the board. If we do it right, the relationship between the officer and the board should be seamless, and we should be one army in that community. You'll hear me say later in the morning that officers come and officers go, but we in the community are there forever. And so we have to make this a bonding. And you're going to be in charge while you're there, but we're going to be there when you're gone. And this is a very intriguing concept that the Army has come up with, and one we'll be talking about and developing as the morning goes along. I just want to tell you, first of all, I want to distinguish for you the difference between a policy board and an advisory board. I happen to serve, I looked at my resume, my CV the other day, and I'm just signed up for my 51st board that I've been on in my lifetime. I guess I collect boards like other people collect stamps, and I don't take them lightly. I've served as chair for more than half of those boards, and as I told you, 42 years on the national board, 55 on Modesto. I don't just join boards to get on my resume. But in looking at those boards, most of them are policy boards. This is an advisory board. Let me tell you the difference between policy and advisory. A policy board, number one, guards the vision and defines it. That's not our role. We're here to enable your vision, but we don't direct the vision. That's directed by the Army, and that is hands off for us. If we were a policy board, we would maintain the vision. Number two, a policy board hires, fires, evaluates the CEO. That's who you're going to be when you get out. You're going to be the CEO in your community, and we as the board don't have one word to say about it. Sometimes that, the colonel is smiling, sometimes that becomes quite an issue, but that's the way it is. And so we get what we get, and we live with it. You're in charge. You're the boss. While you're here, you're in charge. We are your advisors only. In the third area of a policy board is responsible for the financial integrity of an organization. A policy board receives the audit every year that comes to the policy board. In the area of finance, we as advisors take a step up, and we come almost alongside of you. We're still not responsible. If I'm a policy board member and my board goes broke, I'm going to make the front page of the newspaper. A few years ago, the YMCA in my community went broke, and all the board members were on the front page of the local paper, some of whom were also on our advisory board of the Salvation Army and good friends of mine. I don't want to be on the front page of the paper when my organization goes broke. If you guys go broke, which the last time I looked at the balance sheet, you're probably not going to. If you guys went broke, we as advisors would not be responsible. So from that standpoint, we don't have a responsibility there. But we have the integrity responsibility in the community. We are the community. We are the Army in the community, and we have to be responsible. And if the Army has a financial glitch in my community, you know who people are going to look at? They're not going to look at the captain. They're going to look at Dick Hagerty, who's been on that board 50 years, and everybody knows it, who's been walking around the community soliciting funds. And that's who's the responsibility in their minds, responsibility. So from the standpoint of financial integrity, we as board members share the responsibility along with you as the policy and the owners. I hope that's clear, and if it isn't, we can talk about that sometime later. Relationships have to do with several areas. I think first we have a great relationship. First and foremost, we have a relationship with our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, and his Father, God, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. That's first. I'm not going to dwell on that, but we know it. So first responsibility is there. Our second responsibility is to our families, our personal families. We have to keep the integrity of our families. I have seen too many officer relationships break down because of a family breakdown at the officer level. And I got to tell you, when there's a failure at that level because of a family failure, it isn't just the officer that hurts. It's the Army that hurts. It's the board that hurts. It's our local program that hurts. So it's really important from us as advisors to make sure your marriage is good and stays good. And that's why relationships we build with you as officers are so critical. And so I don't want to slide by that. And third, we have a relationship within the community. The community is the key place where we as advisors are working. We are the community, and therefore we have to have that relationship. The first thing we have to do is we have to have a relationship with the officer. And I wrote a document a few years ago called The First 30 Days, and I think it's actually written up as a full chapter in my book, the first book, Achieving Excellence. And it's important in that I say the first thing we need to do is bond with the new officer. When we get a new officer, and no offense to the back row, but we get them too often. When we get a new officer and there's a change, I reach out immediately to that officer, knowing he, she, they are coming, and I say, please, if you can come sooner, come, stay with us, stay in our home. We're going to talk. We're going to introduce you to the community. We're going to do an informal thing. We just want to get to know you. We're not going to put you to work. We're going to treat you great. Teresa's the best cook in the world. Come enjoy Teresa's cooking. You know, back in California, I had a theater in my house, and I knew everybody in town, and we still have a pool in Phoenix. So either way, and by the way, you're all invited. When you got time off, come see us. Everybody else does. And so that relationship must be built. And that relationship, the integrity of that relationship will follow through clear to the end. And when we have an officer situation where we don't have that relationship, we have a very difficult time for the next few years. Just as an example, many years ago, we had an officer who came to town and from another country. He'd been in a country where the Army divided between ministry and social, so he'd been pastoring a giant church. He came, he looked at his very small core constituency, and his first sentence in his first sermon was, I didn't want to come here, and I don't know why they sent me here, and I don't know what we're going to do. Boy, you talk about setting the tone. And I tell you, that was just on one isolated example. Generally, that new officer comes to town early, and we do meet, and we do bond, and we do have a relationship, and that is a critical step in bonding and making it work at our local level. We have to understand that. I'll be talking more about that in my next go-around where I'm filling in for Gaddy. But this relationship has to start working on executing the plan. We got to execute the plan and understand the plan. Here's a problem with a plan. Leaders who come in with a vision and implement a new plan, you know how long it takes to really implement a plan? You'll read about this in one of our books where Commissioner Nolan writes about implementing a plan. It takes 7 years from the beginning of an idea, a concept, to its fruition, to bring it into fruition. What's the average time you're going to spend in a different, especially your first couple of chords? She put up 3 fingers, I'll put up 3.5. That's exactly right, which is exactly half how long it takes. What happens when your plan is halfway there and you get sent to Poughkeepsie or wherever you get sent, and we get the guy from outer Mongolia and he's got a new plan? Do we scrap the old plan? Do we start a new one from scratch? Do we limp along with the old one? It becomes a real problem. It's something that a relationship has to develop, so we have to work within the relationship to understand how we can continue executing the overall plan. The overall plan has to stay in its level of integrity. We build board membership by relationships. We had 40 members on the Modesto board at one time. We were the premier board in the West. And I think your little brother was our officer in the Red Shield at that time. We were sailing high. And one day at a board meeting, there must have been 30 people in attendance. And we were talking about new members and recruiting members, and a board member who was our secretary of our board, she stood up and she said, how many people in this room are here because they were invited by Dick Hagerty? Stand up. Over half the people in the room stood up. Now, am I patting myself on the back? No. I'm just telling you that I had relationships, and every time I had a relationship with people that I could see would be of plus, I was committed to the Army enough that I would implement that relationship and bring those people in. And so we built relationships through my relationships, and it became a board that very much reflected. That's not altogether healthy. I would have much preferred a board that had 5 people of mine and 5 people from 10 other board members, but that wasn't the way it was, and I wasn't going to sit still and wait. So I recruited the friends that I had, whether they were judges or whether they were attorneys or whether they were business managers, men or business people, and not all men. I recruited a number of very solid, powerful women. Some of the best members I recruited to our board were women, and the most productive. Anyway, that's how we build that, and I think we're going to hear more from Caltha on building a board, but I just want to mention that. Also, I want to mention that as a officer, you are a pastor. How many congregations are you going to have? How many congregations are you going to have? You're going to have 3. You can have one that meets on Sundays. It's called your core. Sundays, maybe Wednesday nights, however often you're going to meet. You're going to have your core. You're going to be responsible for those people. Those are your people. That's your core. You got a board. You're a minister to that board. You're going to have people on that board who do not have a church. They do not know the Lord, but they need it, and they need spiritual direction. And that board is your second congregation. Your third congregation is a community at large. There are people in the community who will look to you with the stars on your shoulder, and they will say, that's a leader, that's a pastor, that's somebody I can call on. Joe Pasilico was my officer in Modesto, then he retired as DC down in Phoenix some years back, and Joe told me one time, he said, the first 2 months I was in Modesto, I did 8 funerals and 4 weddings. 8 funerals and 4 weddings. Why? Because the community saw him as a pastoral leader, and it just happened to have a really bad spell of people dying, and they ended up coming to the Army to get somebody to pastor. So don't ever forget, when you're through on Sunday morning teaching, you're not through preaching, you're not through with ministering. You're just getting started. It's a 24/7 obligation on your part. So we have the community at large. We have the needs assessed. We have those relationships. You have a relationship with the other pastors in town. I don't know what community you're going to go to and where it's going to be, but in Modesto we had something called the Modesto Ministerium. And in the ministerium, all the evangelical and some not evangelical but committed pastors in town came together monthly, and they also met at other times, and the Salvation Army officer was up front and very much involved with the ministerium. I will hope in your community that the pastors get together, and I will hope that if they do get together, that you're getting together with them, because churches are an enormous source of board people. My board in Modesto, I think that at one point for my church, I belonged to a very evangelical Presbyterian church. I was mission elder, and I believe we had like 9 or 10 members of our church were board members, and the women's auxiliary, which my wife was president for 2 years, I think half the women on the auxiliary were from my church. So the churches are a very important place to get your support, both out of the community and also for your boards. Don't forget that, and don't let that slide by you. You've also got we, the board, and you, the officers, have got a relationship with upper management in the Salvation Army. Basically, the great guru in your life is going to be your DC. Your DC is the person, obviously we have the TC, and we're blessed to have him here today with us, but you're not going to take your problems to him, I hope. He hopes. But you and the DC need to have a good relationship, because when you do have problems at any kind of level, your DC is your best outlet. And that's a given. Also, fellow officers are important. I hope you've bonded here in school with others so that you'll form a relationship. And when you have a problem down the road, you know who to pick up the phone and call. You can call your friend, your fellow classmate, your officer friends, and those are people you can rely on and get together. Sometimes, back when I first went on the national board, on the boards, it was an us and them mentality. Back 40 years ago, we'd go to a meeting, and all the blues would be over here in one corner, and all of the civilians would be over here in the other corner. Gradually, I've seen that change, and gradually I've seen that come together, and now the board and the officers much more tend to blend and get together, and that's a critical issue. So I want to encourage you to be blending in with other officers, with your community. This is a relationship. This isn't just us and them. This is a relationship that is absolutely critical. I want to stress too that you got relationships with governmental agencies. That's going to be a key part of what you're doing. A key part of what you're doing. You've got local, which is state and probably county. You've got state, and you've got national. I think as Corps officers, you can just about forget the national side. We let the TCs and the national commander take care of that, and watch the game on Thursday, Thanksgiving, when we get to see the big heroes nationally. State is probably not going to be in your purview, but locally, boy, you need to know the local government. You need to know the local government. When David first went to Oxnard last year, I got my first 30 days list out, and I sat down with him and I said, David, I said, you need to go meet the mayor. And David went, whoa. He sputtered and sputtered. I said, I don't want to hear it sputter, so I just want you to be able to call me in the next 10 days and tell me you've met the mayor. And he sputtered some more and finally said, okay, Mr. Dick. And a few days later, he called me. He said, I got an appointment with the mayor Friday. I said, great. He said, well, it's just a meet and greet. We're just going to say hello, and but at least I got to meet him, and I'm going to do that. I said, great. Let me know how it goes. He called me Friday, and he said, I came in, and he shook hands, and the mayor said, well, I've got kind of a little bit of limited time, but sit down. He said, an hour and a half later, I left his office, and he'd appointed me to an advisory commission in the community. This is a guy that's been in town 10 days, but he had the initiative to go and step up in front of those local people who are going to really have an impact on what he's doing in his life, and that was a key moment for him to realize that. The same thing happens as a service club. You're going to have to join a service club. You need to join probably Rotary. As a lifelong Kiwanian, it hurts me to say you need to join Rotary, but if the Rotary Club in town isn't too good, go check out Kiwanis. If there's two of you, maybe you each can take one, but the Rotary Club is probably where the action is. David went to Rotary again. I said, David, just go. You're going to be energized. They're going to love you. They're going to greet you. They're going to treat you with royalty. He walked in. He said, the first thing they said is, welcome. The second thing they said is, we haven't had a Salvation Army officer in this club in 20 years. And the next thing I know is, can you do the invocation at our next meeting? And by the way, and he sent me pictures at Thanksgiving time where he was leading a celebration that Rotary was doing in the community. And they just immediately enveloped him. By the way, they think that one star on your shoulder, they think that means you're a general. Don't tell them otherwise. If they want to think you're a general, go for it. We actually had a board member that used to refer to some officers as generals, and he never did get it, and we never told him the difference. He was a good donor, and he showed up. He didn't always stay awake during the meetings, but that was okay. But I'm telling you that the star on your shoulder legitimatizes you in that community. It makes you a legitimate part of that community, whether it's a service club, whether it's with other pastors, whether it's at the community city center, whether it's the mayor. You have standing. Probably not inside your jacket. Probably inside your jacket, you're shaking like a leaf. You're saying, what am I doing here? Just like I thought the first day I walked in the national board. What am I doing here? And the answer is, you got the S's here, and you got the stars here, and you're representing us, and you're accepted. They know who you are, and they want you there, and they're happy to have you. So I'm just telling you, run with it, take advantage of it. We gave you that uniform. I think we give them the first uniform, don't we? No, okay. We gave you that uniform, and make it work. That's best I can say. Another relationship area. I'm running out of time. I'll talk fast. Another relationship area is fundraising. I've done a lot of work in other missions and agencies relative to fundraising, so it's a kind of a natural thing. And my background is a CPA, so money and tax deductions and things are also a kind of a strategy with me. And we like to call fundraising friend raising. Friend raising. Fundraising is all about relationships. Fundraising is all about relationships. I'll give you the best example I can give you. My last years, I was a real estate developer, and we developed lots of projects. And I was working with a local farm company up in the Central Valley that was massive. They were the largest walnut people in the world. And I got a call one day from the CEO, who was a friend and knew me quite well. And he said, Dick, I got a building downtown that we'd like to give you. And I said, okay. And he said, yeah, he said, it's a pretty good sized building. And I says, meet me downtown. And the building was a whole city block, 40,000 square feet. He said, we've used this as our warehouse. We no longer can use it. We'd like to give it to the Army. He came to me. He didn't call the Army. Now, I'm not patting myself on the back. I'm just telling you that that's what a relationship is about. And so we finally got it accepted. If I were to tell you all the things we had to go through, by December 31st to get that into his tax account. I shudder to remember how much the bureaucracy in up the line, and I'm not going to point any fingers, but oh my goodness, I've seen me in private, and I'll tell you some horror stories about what we had to do. But we got that building, and the appraisal was $2.4 million. $2.4 million, all from a phone call, a relational phone call. Because he knew me, he knew my relationship with the Army, he knew he would like to get rid of that building and have a maximum tax advantage, and so who does he call? He called me. He didn't call the captain, he didn't call the commissioner, he didn't call the colonel, he called me, and because of a relationship. Not because of who I am, but because of the relationship, and because he trusted me, and because he knew my faith and trust in the Army. Later on, just as a little tag into that story, later on we were able, he had two brilliant daughters. They were both Rhodes Scholar caliber, and they were a couple years apart in high school, and those girls came to me and said, we'd like to do something down in the shelter that our family donated to you. And I said, like what? And they formed a girls' Salvation Army mentoring club in their high school, and they met regularly, and they met at the shelter, and they arranged our library, they arranged to help work in the kitchen, they did chores, they did fundraising, they did bell ringing, they did all of that, all because of a relationship. All because of a relationship. It's key. So those relationships are critical, and what you're going to need to do when you got a key donor you need to call on, you with the S's and the stars need to go, but you need to take the right board person along to legitimatize it. And neither one of us, me or the colonel, neither of us is going to be the leader in this thing. We're going to walk in together and we're going to present together, and they're going to recognize us as Army and as community, and you're going to get a much better result than you ever would by simply going out. First of all, mailing is wonderful, but everybody, what do you do in the mail? I get 10 mailings a day at home recruiting me for donations, and all 10 of them go straight in the trash. The mail doesn't really work anymore, no offense, but you know what does work? Relationships. Mail's good for $50 and $100 donations. $1 million donations come for relationships. And I could tell you more stories. I've personally been involved with over $5 million of donations just in Modesto, again, just because of relationships. No, don't have time to get into them, but that's it. That's key. We call that eyeball to eyeball. I learned one time from I taught at the university for 3 years in California in the business department, and the guy that arranged that for me was the head of the psychology department, who then went on to be the president of a Christian university in the Midwest that was failing, and he went back there and he saved that school through his fundraising, and he and I sat for hours and hours talking about how he came, how he went there, how he was able to raise the funds, and it always came back to two things: eyeball to eyeball and coffee cup to coffee cup. He said, I raised all my funds, eyeball to eyeball, jawbone to jawbone, coffee cup to coffee cup. That's how it's done. So again, you build that relationship. Well, I've got 4 minutes left, and I've got a couple quick comments I'd like to wrap up on. First of all, this mentoring program, I got to tell you, I am so impressed with how the mentoring program has gone for some of us. I know it's a two-way street, and I know some of the board probably didn't energize really well. Maybe some of the recipients didn't, but I can just tell you from my experience and some experience from some of the others, this mentorship has been wonderful. Let me tell you the key to it. The key to it isn't this next 6 months while you're here. The key to it is the day they walk out of this place and into their parish, and they say, whoa. And that's when my phone started to ring. That's when David used to call Mr. Dick on a regular basis and saying, you know, I got a situation, or I got this, or I would call him and say, hey, have you done this yet? Have you done this yet? And we back and forth, and that's when it generated. And you heard the email David sent me yesterday, the message, and the one again this morning, and he's probably watching today. It was all about the relationships. We built that relationship, and it was that relationship that enabled him to get off and running. I'm not taking all the credit for it. David's a great officer. He's going to have a great career, but I think I gave him a roadmap which the blessing was that he was willing to listen and willing to follow and willing to go along. And it's just paid super dividends for him, for the community in Oxnard, and for us and our family. We love him. I call him my little brother, and we're doing great, fun things now. And Josie and Joseph have gotten to know them, and I talk to them at least once a week, and I send them information and send them ideas and things. By the way, last year I would get questions via David. So if you have questions or concerns or something specific about some of the things you're hearing today relative to boards, ask Josie, or you're welcome to call me. My email's in the book. My email's published. I'm easy to find, but if you're sheepish on that, just ask them and they will communicate with me, and we can communicate and get questions answered and get you some input. That's really critical, really important. I think the only last thing I would say is that in the area of relationships, it isn't just the board. It isn't just the churches. It's the community at large. I want to tell you, in Modesto, it's going to blow you away. We're going to, in the next half hour, when I'm talking about filling in for Getty, I'm going to talk about committees a little bit. At one time in Modesto, we had 25 committees. 25 committees. The book says you need 3. You should have 4 or 5. We had 25 active committees, and more than half of our committee members were not board members. They were community members. You see, we went out into the community and we recruited people we knew were committed to who we were and what we did and where we were going, and they were willing to come alongside of us and work with us. They didn't have time to go on a board. They didn't have the inclination to be on a board. Maybe they didn't understand what the board was. Maybe they didn't want to take the discipline to the board. Whatever the reasons, I don't want to go there. If they were willing to come alongside of us and affiliate, we were happy to have them. And I can tell you, we had more more committee members that were not board members than we did that were board members, because we reached out with the relationships, spread out broadly across that community, and pulled in everyone. We pulled in the pastors. We pulled in the other agencies and all. And just a word on other agencies, you need to be meeting with those other agencies. What you really need to do when you get to town is do a needs assessment. You need to do tighten up your long-range plan. You know what the needs assessment will teach you? It'll teach you what you're missing and what you're overlapping. Maybe you're overlapping with some other agency, and maybe you're missing something. I see Caltha walking around and back, so it is, my watch says it's 9:59. Come on up, girl. And I'm going to stop now, but I'll be back. Be warned. So, my friend Caltha is from Canada. You'll have to forgive her for that. She's the Canadians don't like us very much, but we beat them yesterday in hockey. We beat them yesterday in hockey.
You did.
And we got more medals than they did, and that's Caltha. How's that for an intro?
Yes. Wow. Good morning, everybody. Mr. Dick did such an outstanding job to talk about not only his career, but he's so passionate, right, about the Army, but he's more passionate about all of you and making sure you're set up for success. So before I get started, I'm going to have everybody get up. We're going to stretch a little bit because, this is a long day. We got a lot going on. But I'm one of those at work. I have a standing desk kind of like this at work. And so I always say every 45 minutes, I try to just get up, move around, stretch. So I'm going to let everybody do that as we kind of get going here, and I'm going to get this deck up for you guys. So feel free to stretch those legs. And as Mr. Dick's talking about Canada, we lost not once but twice in hockey to you guys. No, but it was a beautiful thing to see. I actually was at the Olympics in Vancouver, 2010, when we beat the U.S. The men did. 3-2 in overtime. You guys, it was like the most epic hockey match you've ever seen in your life. It was just amazing. All right. I see, I don't know, is there a way to toggle the screen? I'm thinking it fell asleep. Yeah, if somebody could just pop that up, that would be great. And while we're waiting I'm a mover, so I'm going to take this off and move around. Mr. Dick is honest about come and visit him, because I have been to their house not once, but twice. And for Teresa's cooking, that's really why I went, because I wanted to eat Teresa's food. But they're really just, they love the Army, they love people, so take them up on their offer. I had a chance to not only visit with them, but guess who moved 15 minutes away from them that recently retired? The Rileys. So I got a chance to see the Rileys when I also visited them just last month. So great opportunity. All right, well, everybody have a seat. And while this is kind of getting started, I will give you guys a little bit of a background. Of course, I get to, the privilege of being on this amazing board. And I'm here because of relationships. I feel as though we could probably talk to you guys for a whole day about the value of relationships. And I'm here because of a relationship. Rick Osgood used to serve on this board. He's in Northern California in the Napa Valley. Him and his wife, Kathy, are like second parents to me, and their kids are like my little brothers and sisters. And when they were recruiting board members and looking for people, Rick thought of me. And that's really why I'm here today, through a relationship of a former board member. So similar to what Dick said, it really is about relationships. And as you guys build in the work that God's called you to do, you're going to tap into some of these relationships. How many people are first years? Okay, and second years. All right, so it's an even mix, right? So the first years, I have to say, you're ahead of the game. You're already on the ball, right? Because you're getting this information now. But your second years, you guys are also going to have an opportunity to build on these relationships. And so today's session is really focused on the advisory board. And I think the reason we talk so much about this, because it's one thing I always say. I should probably let you guys know about a book that I really love, Good to Great by Jim Collins. And he talks about not only getting the right people on the bus, but getting the right people in the right seats on the bus. And so that's why this is kind of a two-part presentation today, because it's one thing to like have your blueprint to create it, but then you got to get the right people. So what maybe Christian and Stacy are going to do is going to be different for what the Markhams do, because everybody's region's going to be different. It's almost like my job. So I work in corporate and in the Fortune 500 world, and we have a lot of different industries, right? We have aerospace, we have vehicle, we have electrical, and I've had a chance to work in all those businesses, but I've had to do different things. So what I did in the vehicle group, couldn't do in the aerospace industry. What I've done in the aerospace industry, can't really do in electrical, but you can capitalize on some of those relationships. And so I received a promotion a couple years ago, and I left aerospace and went to electrical. Well, what was neat is God showed me how to leverage those relationships that you built in all those jobs, because the aerospace industry in Lockheed Martin, I kept the relationship with Lockheed. And when I went to electrical, they were building simulators for their pilots, but they needed electrical infrastructure. So I was able to leverage the relationship with Lockheed to help them buy the electrical products. And now our company has 153 sites with our technology of mission critical infrastructure, to think of all these pilots throughout the world that are training, and that was built from a relationship. So just a little bit of an example of how important it is every day with the people that you guys spend time with. Just start. It might be the grocery store. You might meet somebody and just start a conversation and find out what they do, and before you know it, they could help you leverage the work you're doing, or you never know, become one of your board members. So creating an advisory board and recruiting the right board members. So this deck is designed really for you guys to access later, right? Because we're giving you guys a foundation to have things to think about. You're not going to be executing in those things now. But what's nice is you can refer to this later, because I put quite a bit of information, but it kind of sets a little bit of a blueprint. And it's going to be different for everybody, but at least you'll kind of know. So we're going to kind of quickly go through all these things. I do want to have some time just even for a little Q&A, just to, if you have anything that's on your mind, you want to just kind of ask. And so feel free, we'll do that kind of at the end as we go through here. All right, so creating the advisory board. So you're really starting from scratch, right? So whether you end up here in Orange County, you're up in Seattle, you're in Hawaii, wherever you are, you're gonna have to start kind of from the beginning. But you can think about that now, right? But this is basically just, look, this is how the board's set up, and even our current board. So I came and was invited to the board, gosh, it's gonna be 4 years in March, and I was the vice chair the last couple years, and now I've become the chair. So we do not have like a treasurer and secretary for us because we're a larger group. We've got the whole territory, not necessary. Plus Maria Tadero, she runs development. So she runs all the money, right? So we don't really need that for the board. But for your organization, I would say, hey, that's a great place to start. Make sure I have somebody to run the board. When that person isn't there, we have a backup. So Chad Sparks, he's here. You're going to hear from him later. Chad and I actually came in together on the board in March of 22. And then a treasurer and secretary. So that's just a standard. Now you might say, I want more people, I want less people. But this is at least where you'd want to think about starting for your board. And then the committees. And so Dick talked a little bit about that, some 25, some 3. But maybe you say, to start, I just need a program committee and I kind of need a little bit of an executive committee. Or we have $0